Good afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us here midday at Real Wealth. I'm Kathy Fettke, the co-CEO of Real Wealth Network, and I'm joined by this incredible group of investors and investment counselors at Real Wealth. Many of you know who they are, and many of you don't, because we've had so many new members over the last few months, which really surprised us, but also didn't surprise us at the same time. I think people are realizing this would be a really good time to understand real estate investing for so many different reasons, which we'll talk about. And we just thought, what would be an interesting way to spend the afternoon with you? And it was to just, our investment counselors who are here today talk to investors all the time, every day. They are more in touch with what our members are thinking and asking than certainly than I am. And they bring with them a wealth of information and knowledge, being able to talk to so many people and get input and find out what people are thinking. So we will be taking your questions. And first, we've got a couple of questions that I'll be starting with, but and the first would be, I want to introduce each of our investment counselors at Real Wealth and have them give a little story about their, how and why they got started in real estate and where they are invested. So let's start with you, Ben. Most people know you. You've been doing the webinars and hosting the webinars for so long, and leading tours and events. Oh my gosh, just helping so much with events, being the MC at most of them all day long sometimes. So a lot of people do know you, but they might not know your story of how you started in investing, and that you are the director of investor relations at Real Wealth. And so how you got started as an investor and how you ended up joining our team.
Sure. Well, I lived in Northern California about 30 years ago and rented a house and just ended up buying it. Just a buddy of mine, we just ended up just splitting it 50-50, and that just kind of started the bug. And then I bought a condo in Oakland, and then I ended up a couple years later moving to Arizona because I could buy a Veterans Administration. I'm not a veteran, but they had a program where you could buy a VA home. You didn't have to qualify, which I couldn't because I didn't hardly have any money, or certainly didn't have any work experience, and bought 2 homes in Arizona, and then moved back to the Bay Area with a couple of those homes, discovered Real Wealth Network, having 3 homes under my belt, and then I did fix and flip for a while. Actually, I forgot that, in Arizona. Moved back to California and ended up just diversifying. And now I have a bunch of homes in a total of 11 doors in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. And got rid of all the fix and flips. That's the definition. You don't hold them. And then I still have most of the homes that I bought to hold, except for the ones in California and Arizona. I no longer have anything west of the Mississippi anymore. I just slowly moved east, I think, with the real estate prices. They were just much more affordable out here. So that adds up to like 30 years, which is really hard to believe.
Amazing. And a lot of people don't, well, maybe a lot of people do realize we gave up our office in Walnut Creek about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And right around that time, it was because so many of our staff were already moving.
We'd all scattered. Yeah. So when I was in Walnut Creek, and then I moved to Florida in 2016, and it's kind of nice. It's a nice change of pace. So far, so good. I don't know how many more years I have in me. I like it here, but it's fun to live in an area like I did in Arizona, where you can actually invest. I'm not necessarily doing anything actively, but in your backyard, it's not a lean-to, isn't $500,000. It's kind of nice.
Well, Thank you for all you do for our members. You came to us. You were in the hotel industry, right? And
audiovisual hospitality industry. And I think I heard you on CanBR doing an interview with somebody, and I'm like, wow, this is perfect. I live in an area that's too expensive now. I could just, someone else has researched other markets, so it was perfect. So I became a member. I was a member for, I think, about 2 years, and then came to work for you. And here I am 6 years later.
Probably a good thing you're not in the hotel industry right now, too.
Yeah, fine with me. I do not miss it. Thank you very much.
Now, I don't know who came next. I think it was Aristotle. Were you? Yeah, you were the next one that came on. Okay. So Aristotle, your story and how you got started as a real estate investor and with Real Wealth.
So I got my real estate license back in 2007, and that was because my family had owned real estate, but I didn't really understand it when I was a kid growing up, right? So my dad owned some properties in St. Louis. That's where my family's from. And I used to ride with my dad to go collect rent, right? And it was at the time, it was kind of scary because he would carry this like, not a billy club, but like I forget what they call it. It's like a lead, like a mallet that has like some lead at the end of it. And I was like, why are you carrying that in your car? Because he was in very sketchy areas, right? But I would go with him to collect rent. And then so as I got older, I kind of realized like, oh, okay, he's buying properties to rent them out. I'm like, okay. So, and my family has owned other fourplexes and things like that. So that's probably why I wanted to get my real estate license. And then I started working with a broker here in California selling multifamily property. And then 2008 and 9 came around and that kind of just slowed down a lot. And then I ended up working with another company at the time, or working with a company, I should say, that did turnkey properties. And that was my first venture into it. And I started learning about it, understanding how cash flow works and everything. And then I would say, I think it was probably in 2013, I bought my first property, and it was a turnkey house. I went out there, I saw the whole thing, and that was in Memphis. That's where I started. And I ended up buying a few more there as the years went on. And then I started with RealWealth Network in 2015. So it's been 5 years. Yeah, actually, I think I started in April or May of 2015. And and then when I came on board here, then I bought some more properties through our providers. So right now I'm in Memphis, I'm in Huntsville, Alabama, I'm in Montgomery, Alabama, and I'm in Indianapolis. I bought an Indianapolis property about 4 months ago. So 3 different states, 4 different markets. So yeah, that's my story. So I haven't been investing that long, but long enough to know what I'm doing and have experience.
I would say that's a pretty good amount of time. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And then Joe, I would hear you at the San Jose RIA events. You would often give economic updates, and I just was really impressed with what you were doing. And I don't remember how, I just remember saying to Rich, boy, how are we going to get that guy? He's going to be way too expensive for us. And, you were working in the Silicon Valley, and boy, those salaries are huge. And so then we just had a conversation, and you were ready to move on and do something, be full-time in real estate. So we got really lucky. But Joe, yeah, let us know how you how you got started in real estate, and also as a Silicon Valley tech guy.
Okay, well, I've been with RealWealth Network for 4 years now, and I was working with another provider a year before that. But mostly, and I've been investing since 2004. I was in high tech working at various Silicon Valley companies, and I was towards the end of the dot-com boom. I was working for 3 internet startups that went belly up in 4 years, one after the other. And one of them was not too far from my house. And after it went bankrupt, I was driving back and forth, passing the place, and I noticed that even though the company was no longer there, the building, the brick and mortar, was still there, still collecting rents and making money for its owner with a new tenant. So I started thinking more in terms of real estate instead of investing in internet stocks. And so I started going to the San Jose Real Estate Investor Club, learning everything I could, coming to RealWealth Network meetings. And then I started investing in 2004 in Phoenix, and then in Dallas, and then other places. So lately I've been selling the older homes and buying new. So I have properties now in the Tampa market, in Huntsville. And I have one last house in Dallas. I want a 1031 sometime this year, but I haven't decided where I want to go. I want to try a fourplex. It's just a matter of where I can find a good fourplex. So that's kind of my background and how I got in here.
And like Ben, you might be scattering across the country as well eventually and leaving California. That's a goal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lower property tax or state income taxes.
Yep. All right. Wonderful. And it's your birthday.
Sunday. Yes.
Sunday. Okay. All right.
Should we all spontaneously break into song again? Just kidding.
No, I don't. No. I don't know if we were live a few minutes before 12, but if we were, you got to hear that. That was not good. All right. So Leah, you are our newest investment counselor. We had an investor panel. We do that about once a year at what were live events in San Francisco and LA. And we thought, okay, let's have this panel, and all the investment counselors kind of reach out to people that they've been working with. And Leah came on the panel with your husband, and we were blown away. We were just blown away by your presence and your speaking ability and your knowledge. And I mean, same thing. It's like, I kept calling Ben, how do we get her? How do we get her? And I think you sent me an email and I was like, okay, we're doing this. So we're really happy to have you on board. So tell us your story.
Yeah, so I bought my first home with my husband. Actually, we were very young, straight out of college, just got married. My husband's in the Army, he's active duty officer, and our very first assignment was flight school, southern Podunkville, Alabama. And we bought a house using the VA loan. It was a brand new construction townhome, got into it with no money down. In fact, it was actually when they were doing the $10,000 first home buyers tax credit too. So we got a $10,000 check to buy this house for no money down. And we knew just looking at it, I mean, that the mortgage payment management was all about $300 below what the rental price was. Our friends were renting the one next to us. So it was kind of one of those, you happened into it. We knew we were going to be there short term. Flight training was a year and a half. So we bought this house. We lived in it for the year and a half using the VA loan, and then moved to Korea and kept it as a rental. And really just watched it perform really well. I mean, a property that we didn't pay for was occupied all the time. So at some point, I think we just had this conversation where we realized, wow, that was a really smart decision, and we weren't even trying. So imagine what we could do if we were really focused on what we could create. So we moved back to the States. We lived in North Carolina. We flipped a house. We did a live and flip while we lived there, and it went really well. But at the end, we had all of this capital that we knew we needed to get reinvested, and we were moving to Europe this time. And so we were just very quickly looking for, and by this time we were really convinced by the long-term buy and hold method. The flip method worked for us partly because we lived in it, so it was taxed differently. So we just from Europe started looking for ways to get into more property. So we immediately went back to the same first market that we owned in, and we bought a foreclosure, and we oversaw a renovation of that foreclosure from Europe. And it was just, it's a success story. It wasn't a huge failure, but it did require a little more time than we wanted to dedicate to it. And at the end, we were under leveraged on the property. We didn't improve it enough to justify a cash out refinance or anything. So we started saying, man, wouldn't this be great if there was a way out there for us to purchase properties from somebody else who did that, who purchased it. It was turnkey, so that we could maximize our leverage, continue to put our capital to work, and work our day jobs. And so just through pouring ourselves into podcasts and research, we came across RealWealth Network and made some connections, in various markets through the network, and put a bunch of capital to work in that year. So that was in 2017. We got about 7 homes in about a year and a half through the network. And just love it. Just really believe in the fundamentals. And and it's great for us because we're very mobile. We have since moved back to the States and now back overseas. And so we had to find a way to, stay connected to opportunity and deals, even when we're living in weird places where maybe it doesn't make sense to invest, or where we can't. So.
And where do you live now?
So right now I live in Bogota, Colombia.
And you've got properties where?
So we have properties, we're in 2 markets in Ohio, Cincinnati and Cleveland, Birmingham, and then the submarket in Alabama, Houston, and then soon to be Jacksonville. So we've got 10 right now.
Wow. And that was your goal initially, right? Or what, do you have a new goal now?
Well, of course, that's the great thing. The goal just keeps moving further and further away, but that's the way it's supposed to work, right?
So since you're newer to this, I think, than the other investment counselors, and when I'm assuming this is your first downturn or, your first crisis or recession, whatever we want to call this thing.
Right.
Were you initially panicked, or were you like, all right, here we go. I get to
no, and I think
the honor.
Well, I want the badge. I want the badge that says you survived something, so yeah. I don't know if I'll get it this one, to be frank. But I think part of it is just learning from people who went through it before. I really feel like, we never got into this hoping for, crazy appreciation. We never strayed away from the fundamentals, and part of that's just who we chose to be mentored by in podcasts and in education. And so focusing on those fundamentals, I've felt fine during this crisis. Of course, this is a weird crisis, so there's variables here that none of us know how to deal with, even people who went through it before, the fact that so many people are unemployed. But I feel like the focus of fundamentals and buying properties that work today, not properties that you hope work in 3 to 5 years, is a lot of reason why I feel really confident with where we sit right now.
Wonderful. All right. And then I know my story is in the book, Retire Rich with Rentals. If people haven't read that, you can learn a lot of my story. But what a part of the story that I don't think I talked about in the book is how we got into our first house. So I'll just tell that really quickly, that Rich and I had just gotten married. I think gotten married in 97. And right around that, we were renting and we were kind of renting this house in Pleasant Hill, California, that we called the Spider House because I wanted to get our kids in that school district, great school district, but it's expensive. So we, at the time, had to rent this house that was just it was very old. And my daughter is terrified of spiders to this day because we'd clean them out. The next day would be full of spiders and she'd have to look at her bed. Anyway, we wanted to leave the Spider House. And right around then, my dad called in a panic and said, I don't know what to do. I just got back from vacation with mom and got this letter in the mail, a syndication I invested in, this apartment in Marin. It didn't do well and they sold it, and I've written it off for all these years, and now I got to pay all these back taxes. And he was literally about to retire like that next month and freaking out because he didn't have the few $100,000 he would have had to pay in taxes. And I'm like, well, what do you need? How can I help you? And he said, well, I need to find a replacement property. And I was like, huh, well, tell me more. And so that's when I learned what a 1031 exchange was. He needed to find a place to put that money. And unfortunately, because he'd been traveling and you only have 45 days to do it, they had like 2 weeks to identify this property. And I thought, well, Dad, how about I be your tenant and I'll go find the property, and then maybe someday I can inherit it. And so he said that would be wonderful because he didn't want to be a landlord. That was something he preferred syndications. So I went out, I found a property that day, and Rich and I at that time and this was 97, we had the belief that you have to be rich to own real estate. So we always wanted to own real estate, but we just didn't think we were ready and we didn't understand any of it. So this was this opportunity to just kind of pick out a house and rent something that we chose. That was the idea, and to help my dad. So I ended up, and it was a big exchange at the time. It had to be like $500,000. And again, this was 97. So I ended up finding this 7-bedroom house in Lafayette that met this, the exchange. And I showed my dad that day. I mean, literally, this all happened in a matter of days. And I said, look, we can just take this big house and turn it into a 4-plex. We'll just rent out this and we'll take care of it. It'll be a little apartment that you own, but we'll manage it. And then someday we'll inherit it. And that's what we did. So we ended up renting those rooms to friends who also had kids. So it was like a little commune, but it was very fun because one of our friends was a musician and he would, play music at night, and we'd watch his kid and then he'd watch our kid. It was really, really what now they call house hacking. But that's how I got in, and that house ended up being kind of the savior to us later, which I talk about in the book. So I haven't shared that story much, but it was a great win-win to be able to help my dad and my mom, and they were able to retire. And then we were able to get into our first property.